am the Vice President for Think 450, which is the innovation and partnership engine of the National Basketball Players Association. We represent all 450 current NBA players, helping them to maximize their collective influence. I'm originally from Los Angeles. I live in New York now, but I am so excited to be here. I was actually born at UCLA. My father was an undergrad here, and then in the late 90s, I worked here. So I'm super excited to be back here, and I'm excited for this very important conversation that we're gonna have today on the topic of creating positive change through sport. We have three great panelists: Christina Norman, who is the head of content for Think 450. We have Baron Davis, who is a two-time NBA All-Star, entrepreneur, and investor. And we have Ekundayo, who is the GM for the Prisoner Wine Company and a great partner to Think 450. And they are all prepared to discuss the role of athletes in driving social change and best practices for partnering with athletes who are active and successfully influential in their efforts to do and say the right thing for sport, the community, and the world. So we're gonna jump right in. So throughout history, we've seen many different athletes who take a stand to drive positive change. They stand up for something they believe in. And I'd like to have the world or the audience get to know you by sharing a little bit about an athlete activism moment that is meaningful to you. I will give you a little bit of time to think about it, so I'll start. So one athlete activism moment that has been meaningful and memorable to me was after Trayvon Martin was killed. The Heat and LeBron James decided to take a picture, all wearing hoodies. They posted it to Twitter with the hashtag I am Trayvon Martin. And that was very meaningful to me because I think, you hear a lot of NBA players say that when you see them on the court, they're your heroes, you aspire to be them, but when they leave that court and they put on that hoodie, they look like any other black man who's at risk for their lives. And I think with that picture, they were trying to say that they want you to see the humanity in them. That's important to me because I have a 16-year-old boy at home. He wears a lot of hoodies, and I need people to see the humanity in him. So that's my moment. Christina, why don't you tell us about your moment?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Anderson School, for having us here. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about what it is that we do and the importance of elevating athletes' activism. There are obviously tons of great moments, and I think of them always visually, right? There's the images, the pictures that stay with you forever, and there are those moments that stay with you forever. But for me, I think it's really more about a big shift. I am the world's most amazing spectator. I have no athletic ability whatsoever, so I spend a lot of time watching sports. I have two daughters, and I remember the first time I called them into the room to see Serena and Venus Williams, and seeing them in their braids and seeing these girls who looked like them, who were so powerful and so strong in the face of so much hatred. And really changing the world. I mean, we know them as those icons, but when you think about everything Venus did around equal pay, they've really had a tremendous impact. And that legacy is huge.
Go Bruins. I kind of just want to go play some basketball right now. I would say what was pivotal for me was the riots in LA. I was 13 years old. Went to a private school at Crossroads, and everything was cool. And on my way back home, I was going right into the heart of the riots. And I would say to see like the athletic community in sports kind of like figure out how to carry on, right? And seeing Lakers and Clippers, and professional athletes actually getting out in the community and trying to like stop the peace, stop the violence. I think for me as a young person, that was kind of a pivotal moment for me because I was going through these two different worlds, trying to figure out like where is my place and where do I fit in. And so I would give credit to the riots for actually like striking a chord. And then I would say second is the WNBA. Just their attention to what's actually happening, in the world, in media, in social justice, social change. And when you saw them all collectively, start changing the landscape of fashion, right, and media to address, the whole Say My Name campaign. So that was another one.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My example is exactly Christina's. When I you shared that question, I was reflecting on it, and I was just so taken aback by the history of Black women standing in their power for my generation, starting with the Williams sisters, with their hair, their outfits, their post-game interviews, just really speaking their truth, knowing that their identity, their image is good enough and more than good enough, and then carried on through to, you know, women athletes like Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka. But I actually asked the question to a friend last night at dinner, and she said her favorite moment was Marshawn Lynch at the Super Bowl saying that he's just here so he won't get fined. And I was like, what is that? Like, how is that activism? She was like, he was standing up for himself. So I support that as well, too.
I think he might have been the precursor for all the NBA athletes who in the bubble decided to use that platform and those press conferences to speak about what they wanted to speak about. You know, they're going to talk about what they want to talk about. So I think one of the things that I hear that all of these moments have in common is the imagery, the strong imagery that, that those memories evoke and those images evoke, and collective influence. It's like, how do these athletes come together and impact a whole community, impact a whole gender? And when we talk about collective influence, nowhere was that collective influence more evident than during the unprecedented NBA season in the bubble, when the players decided to use their platform to fight for social justice and racial equality. Think 450 recently produced a documentary that premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. Yay. Congratulations, Christina, called Game Change Game. And that documentary, it chronicles everything that happened in the bubble. And we have a clip from that documentary that we're going to share with you.
I can't explain this year, man. I feel like every time you turn around a corner, you're getting punched in the face. No, I ain't going to get hit again. Bam.
My rookie year was definitely an experience, one to remember. We knew it was going to be a little crazy. There's no way we could have expected what actually happened.
There's so many more issues than players being able to play here, okay?
If the games ever stop, Rome stops. If Americans don't have the joy of sports and entertainment, this country may go berserk.
You know how many skeptics were out there telling them they couldn't do it, it couldn't be done?
We said if we are gonna go play, then it has to be bigger than the game.
With that context in mind, we know that storytelling can be a powerful tactic for increasing activism and creating change. Christina, why don't you start by telling us about how Think 450 approaches content and how the documentary came to be?
So, you know, the doc was just, as I think all of us experienced during COVID, just one of those things where things crashed together and there was an opportunity that we really couldn't look away from. I mean, seeing how the players were using their platform in such powerful ways and standing up for and demanding change, it was so important for us to be able to tell that story from the player's perspective. There were lots of business perspectives. There were tons of other perspectives, but there were only a few guys who went into a bubble, who cut themselves off from the world, and who used that platform in a very powerful way. It was also important for us to think about the legacy, and I think that's what I think about so much with the storytelling that we do at Think 450. There's tons of people who cover what happens on the court. You cannot, escape finding coverage of the game in every way possible. So we spend a lot of time in what we call 2312 storytelling. So if everybody else owns that 48 minutes, that's what happens on the court, we live in the 23 hours and 12 minutes that the players live their lives. What are their passions? What are their interests? What do they do? What are they going to do next? It's one of the statistics that comes up in the film is that the average playing career, and obviously LeBron just started his 20th season last night, but the average playing career is around 4.5 years. So for a lot of players, this is a very small moment in which they are going to have an incredible impact, but how do they translate that? And I think it was really important for us to make sure that people see our players as more than just athletes, that they see that they take this responsibility incredibly seriously, and that this isn't just a moment, it's a movement. So, really being able to talk about that legacy storytelling, whether that legacy is about their professional accomplishments, but it's also about what they are doing for the next generation, what they are making possible for the next generation. I think that's what we're trying to embrace in a lot of our storytelling.
Thank you. Boogie, The Prisoner uses the bottles and artists who designed the bottle labels to tell a very powerful story about sort of how your purpose and your profit come together. Talk about the importance of storytelling from the prisoner perspective.
Yeah, storytelling is a part of our DNA. So I'm the brand person for, I don't know how many of you guys are wine drinkers, but I work for the Prisoner Wine Company, and our flagship brand is the Prisoner. It's the red wine that has this fine art label of a prisoner in chains. And originally, our founding winemaker selected that label because he felt really boxed in the traditions of Napa Valley winemaking. But 20 years later, that really doesn't, it's not nearly as relevant as I think he felt it was 20 years ago. For us, you know, art and storytelling still carries through, but we really benefited a lot from the provocativeness and evocativeness of our label, and felt like as a brand we had an opportunity and frankly a responsibility to use that evocative nature of our label to actually tell a different story, a more contemporary story, and one that actually can do more good and create positive change in the world. And so for us, you know, being a wine brand called The Prisoner, with that label, we felt as though what was the most human story to tell was to platform issues related to you know, the injustice in America's criminal justice system, the need for prison reform. And so we were so drawn to the work that the NBPA and Think 450 were doing, because, you know, you are highlighting athletes that have met incredible success, but using their platform, using the bright lights and platforms that they get to actually tell a different story, and tell a story that can actually create positive change. So there's quite a lot of parallels to that, and we felt like it was a wonderful partnership for us.
And one that continues that we're excited for. Baron, you have the Black Santa Company, and we're going to be partnering with you this holiday. And it's described as a character-focused company that celebrates diversity in storytelling through content and products. Tell us a little bit about how the Black Santa uses storytelling to create change.
Thank you. So, Creative Black Santa just figured that we needed another Santa Claus, and Christmas needed to have a remix. And, you know, we all about remixing culture and creating our own. But the whole thought around Black Santa is, you know, I've never seen a black man in my life that was positive, gift-giving, magical, on time, and jolly. I know it's funny. You know, you find one, you tell me. And so, you know, it was the depiction of media, right? Especially, you know, back when Trayvon Martin, when we were thinking of it, it was the depiction of black males in media. And it was like, how can we change the narrative for black men? So how can we find someone or build superheroes or super characters or story-driven characters that now, when our kids are born, they actually have positivity to look up to? And so that was the whole, you know, thesis around Black Santa, is like, let Black Santa be the storyteller to the storyteller. Let him go and unearth culture and heritage by allowing other communities to celebrate and tell their story. And so basically making him the Christmas Santa that's a DJ, that loves music, that loves sports, that loves culture, right? It gives us an opportunity to put our talents, our skills, right, but our attention to emotional, you know, uplifting, right? When you have this Christmas and this holiday, everybody's uplifting, and if we can feed into that, buy into that, right, and have a character that can initiate that and tell that story and reciprocate, you know, that feeling, then I think it just gives the world a better view on the next black man that they're going to encounter.
I love that he's on time. You can't be late for Christmas. So in addition to storytelling, which seems to be one of the big drivers of impact for the current athlete activist movement and their athletes' ability to directly connect with their fans through things like social media, I want to dive into what other things are different about the current movement versus the previous movement. So if you think about 60 years ago, right, Ali refusing the draft in '66, the Cleveland Summit with Jim Brown, Lou Alcindor, and Bill Russell in '67, and Tommy Smith at the Olympics in '68. A lot of the 60 years have passed, but what these athletes, what our NBA players are fighting for are very much the same things, right? We want racial equality. We want changes in the structures that govern us. So what are some of the other things so the NBA players in the bubble were able to accomplish a lot. The jerseys, getting the protest statements on the jerseys, Black Lives Matter emblazoned on the court. There's not going to be voting. There's not going to be a game on election day this year, right? They made a lot of changes in what seems to be a short amount of time. What is different? Why were they able to make such a big change in such a short amount of time? And Baron, I'm going to start with you this time. What do you think is different about athletes today and how they're able to really assert their influence?
They're not apologetic, right? So, I think the athletes of this culture, and actually starting, with LeBron, they're entrepreneurs, right? They're politicians, right? They're executives, and so they're so well versed, right, that you cannot box them in. And so their opportunity and knowing their worth and knowing their value, right? They have an opportunity and a brand, right, and to say something that's meaningful. And so they don't care, right? They know what their responsibility is. They know what they care about, and they're not going to let media just keep asking them questions at a Super Bowl about a sport that's like, all right, I do this. It's like, ask me something that I care about, and so they're so emotionally in tune. And I would say it's from social media, digital media, and they're their own little committee. They're their own little society. And so when you see these, when you see changes happening in the league, it is a communal thing, and LeBron and even the young guys, they don't care. They will wear what they want. They will say what they want because they know that they're standing up, from the opportunities that they had in the past, seeing other athletes.
I think that's an interesting change, but I think there could also be change on the consumer side, right? So Christina, much of your work is consumer targeted. Why don't you talk about changes you've seen from consumers being more receptive to the athletes who are taking a stand?
Yeah, well, obviously everything Baron says is 100%, right? I think that the fact that athletes are media brands now and that they're not afraid of putting that out there in a positive way. But I also think that fans have expectations of athletes, and I think they're willing to call them out on things. I think they're willing to engage in a one-to-one dialogue, and I think they're willing to reward both athletes, brands, everybody who sort of steps up and does something. And at the same time, they will absolutely take you down if you don't come correct. So I think really what we're seeing is in this, social media exploded the two-way dialogue. It's not about, I'm just going to ask you a question and you can answer whatever, I throw at you. There's a great moment in the doc where we've got all these clips of Tobias Harris, every question after one of the games that he was asked, he just kept responding, when are the cops who shot Breonna Taylor going to get arrested? And, you can ask me whatever you want, I can tell you whatever I want. And I think understanding that power and having that reflected back from a fan perspective is like, all right, I see you, and you see me. So I think that's what's so powerful right now is this, two-way dialogue that elevates the conversation, that elevates the responsibility, that rewards, and at the same time, unfortunately, sometimes punishes.
And I think you said also that that fans are expecting brands to be accountable.
Oh, absolutely. We've seen this with so many brands that, we just see this constant. I'm sure everybody remembers, I think it was H&M. Was it 2 or 3 years ago? With the T-shirt, the coolest monkey in the jungle, and you're like, who was in the room or who wasn't in the room? How did this thing get done? And then they got dragged as a result of that. So we've seen it with Papa John's. We've seen it with a lot of brands.
Kendall Jenner crossing the
Pepsi.
line and
Yeah,
giving a police officer
there
a
are
Pepsi.
so many things like that, and I think consumers are forgiving, but also have a memory.
And we'll talk more about some of the watch outs later, but Buki, from a brand perspective, what makes brands more likely to pair with athletes and partner with them to impact change? Because I think a lot of times you have to give over the reins a little bit when you're working with an athlete in order for it to come off authentically.
Absolutely, but I think, starting with what Christina said, I think that's just the consumer expectation, period. The BS meter is really tuned in these days, so consumers have a high expectation for authenticity and for brands to message them from an authentic place. And for all the reasons Baron already gave, I think who is more authentic, frankly, than at least American athletes right now. You have the intersection of a really huge platform. They also tend to have very diverse fan bases, so that's quite appealing from a brand perspective. But then on top of that, they just have incredibly authentic voices, and so if you align with them on a message or program that they truly care about, I think the messaging just resonates far better than, frankly, we could create in a 30-second ad spot. So
Ooh, I love that you said that. We find a lot of success in something we call brand allyship, where you find a point of connection between a brand and a player, and you use that as a natural jumping off point for a true collaboration. It's not give us the brand brief and have the athlete parrot back the message. It's let's bring the message together and use our platforms to amplify it. So I love that you said that. All right, so we've talked about all of the great things that can happen when everything goes right, but we know that this is a very sensitive space to activate and try and move forward social change. So let's talk about some of the watch outs. Starting with you, Christina, because you touched on it a little bit. We've all heard about pink washing and green washing. Now I've started to hear about athlete washing. How do we avoid some athlete washing? I know that at Think 450, we've had some great partnerships with partners like The Prisoner, DoorDash, Dove Men Plus Care, but we've also had some people come and pitch us and didn't quite go right. So talk about some of the watch outs.
I think it's something that Buki was sort of alluding to as well. You have to be able to listen. That's the first thing. If a brand comes in with preconceived notions of, we want this player to do this thing, to hold up this thing, it's like we're not even listening anymore. And you're not listening to us. So really understanding, taking some time to understand who the athlete is, what is important to them, and then finding that point of connection, because without that, it rings so false all the way around. The athlete isn't interested in it, the brand is pushing for something that's not going to happen, the consumer's going to ignore it. I mean, it's a disaster in every way possible. So I think really it's about making sure that both sides are listening and that even mentioning the unmentionable things. You got to talk about athlete washing. You got to talk about like we're not here to do that. And as long as everyone is, and even then, brands have their briefs, they have their goals, but I do think that trying to lay the foundation very early in the partnership is critical.
And Baron and Boogie, you guys can both address this. The difference, because you and I just had a brief conversation on the side where we talked about this. What's the difference between armchair activism and legitimate actions? How do you show that legitimate, sustained commitment?
I believe armchair activism is really just, I think it was exactly, what was it, Blackout Tuesday or something? So the black squares on Instagram, I think that's probably the best example of armchair activism I've seen, especially if it starts and stops there. I hate to just always be the ditto person, but I feel like Christina made a really great point. I think it really just starts with having the humility to learn. And for a long time at the Prisoner Wine Company, that's really all we did. We had a partnership with the Equal Justice Initiative, and we were just like, please just come talk to us. One can imagine what it looks like when your operations are centered in Napa Valley. We don't have a ton of diversity, particularly when it comes to experiences as it relates to America's prison system, but we had a lot of willing people that wanted to just understand and build empathy. And I can't overestimate how much time it takes to do that the right way. And then even exactly when you have a seat at the table with some potential partners not coming in with your master plan and saying sign at the bottom of the contract to go do this, but really understanding how it can be mutually beneficial to both yourself and their organization. And I think a lot of the thinking that we've had around, we came in with some certain ideas on how a brand like ours could best serve this issue, and in talking to multiple partners found that we needed to shift a little bit, and I think it's only made our programs better.
Yeah, and I think before you go in, Baron, I think with our partnership, even the first thing we did with Tobias Harris at the premiere of Game Change Game, you educated him about what your efforts are, but there was no script. And I think what he said about the product and about the partnership was just so heartfelt and authentic, and it came across really well. So don't always need that structured brief. Baron, tell us the no-goes from the athlete perspective.
I think that's the perfect setup. I would say for me, it's brand, athlete, studio, table why. You know what I mean? We have to start tabling the why instead of the what, right? You can't come into Think 450 and says, this is what we're doing. You have to say, this is why we're doing it. This is why we want to do it with him. This is our mission. You know, this is why we want to support you. And then you start thinking about, you know, how you're going to get it done. How is the collaborator, right? And then the what is what they're going to respond to, right? And so I think by tabling why, you start to have a better opportunity for a collaboration and an understanding of what you want to put out. We've done some stuff with a bunch of major brands, and, you know, part of a Black initiative where it's like, you know, this campaign is happening, all these Black people, Black designers, Black cameramen, everything's Black, and then we see each other and we're all meeting each other for the first time at a party, taking pictures, and then all these great people go back to their job. And so I think that's arm distance as well. It's like, if you're gonna get us all together, just a party, just to make sure that, you know, you get your brand ROI, then it's not doing anything for the culture or the bottom line of your why. Oh, thank you. That's cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. And I also think it's like, you know, so armchair activism, you know, the black square wasn't the problem. The fact that it was only the black square was the problem. But that's what you're saying too, Baron. Like, are you guys in it for real? Or are you just in it for the photo op? Because we're not here for the photo op.
And why would you put a black screen up when everybody should have some type of messaging? Like, what are you boycotting?
A call to action.
Right.
Exactly.
Right, and I think a lot of times just like we don't think about why are we doing this, right? Because of social media, because of attention media, right? It's like the why behind the bubble was like, we have to explain why we did this. We're going to show you why these guys came together, and now the result of it is Tribeca, you know, other film festivals and people pouring into it, because even if you weren't paying attention, you get to go and relive it, and now you have some substance and context of what was happening.
Definitely, thank you. Well, we have 2 minutes left, so we're gonna skip to the end. So I'm a big fan of Pardon the Interruption, and I've always wanted to do this. We're gonna close with the big finish. This question is for each of you. What advice would you give to young athletes, content creators, or brands who are looking to use their platform for good? And as part of the big finish, if you wanna share something that you're working on, that you're excited about, that's gonna bring about some positive change, you can share that as well. Anyone can start.
You know, my biggest advice is listen, listen, listen. Talk to as many people. Use your network just to run ideas by each other and get as much information before you, to start to answer your why and before you decide what it is that you're going to go do. Something that I'm personally really proud of, personally and professionally, is the Prisoner Wine Company just launched our first limited edition drop called Corrections, and this is a really beautiful, special pack of wine that we designed in collaboration with a black male artist named Chris Burnett, actually born and raised in LA. And he was inspired by some of the research that we were able to share with him around the impact of America's criminal system. 100 million Americans are directly impacted by our prison system. And so I would just encourage you guys to check it out, but it's a labor of love. Proceeds from the wines actually are going towards an organization called Rubicon, which is an anti-poverty organization. The majority of their cohort participants are formerly incarcerated, and they've been working with us to actually create a second chance hiring program within our winery and our hospitality center. So it's a wonderful program.
Congratulations, thanks.
I guess, you know, despite everything that we said about watch outs and whatever, don't give up, keep trying. This is not something where there's a one-size-fits-all solution, and whether it's a idea you have to have impact or if it's a way in which you want to connect, try it, and make sure you listen, talk to a lot of people, don't give up. From a what's next for us perspective, we're going to be bringing the doc to a theater near you soon, so stay tuned for that information. But also, we're working on a big kids strategy, which I'm really excited about and proud of. You know, as Barron was talking about, I want to make sure that there are positive images for young black boys to see of black men everywhere that they look, and so much of that is controlled through the media. So we spent a lot of time thinking about Black Boy Joy, and have a bunch of projects coming to fruition soon.
Amazing. I would say for athletes, you know, Daz Effect said, check yourself before you wreck yourself. So check yourself, make checkpoints, and make sure that, you know, you are always aligned with being your biggest critic, so you'll know what you stand for, what you want to stand on. And I would say I'm excited about the holidays. Black Santa's coming. We have a partnership with Think 450 and the PA, and bunch of local partners, and I think this year is going to be great because, you know, we can't announce it now, but we're going to have a lot of small businesses and, you know, local businesses in this big, like, party, you know, people can go shop, marketplace. So we can't announce the destination, but, you know, it's starting to finally become our own little Black Santa, Winter Wonderland, and hopefully Disneyland. So that's what we're excited about.
Awesome. I'm excited to have participated in this conversation with all of you guys. I hope everyone found it helpful. I will say the other thing I'm excited about is Think 450 Gives is our holiday activation. It's coming to LA. It's the NBPA players' opportunity to give back to the community with 14 days of giveaways. Look for the bus. It'll tip off on Black Owned Friday, where you should shop, support, and search Black-owned businesses. Thanks for having us, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.